It's with a heavy heart that I make this video. Many of you don't understand how the economic system works and the power elites behind our everyday lives. And this is going to be my way of explaining it to you. I hope you understand, take you by the hand and show you how everything works. And this is why I truly believe we should do away with money and currency of all kind.
Mama, take this badge off of me, 'cause I can't use it anymore. It's getting dark, too dark to see. Feel like I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Well, Mama, put that gun to the ground, 'cause I can't shoot them anymore. There's a long black cloud coming on down. I feel like I'm knocking on heaven's door. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Oh, I feel like I'm knocking. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Feel like I'm knocking. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Yeah. I'm knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Said I feel like I'm knocking, knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
Because I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld, and and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that."
Soros goes further in that he has said that he wants to be the conscience of the world. He was quoted by his biographer, Kaufman.
Yes, I did say that, and actually I stand by it. I think the world very much needs a conscience. I want my foundation network to be the conscience of the world.
He was born in Budapest, Hungary on August 12, 1930, as George Schwartz, the son of Orthodox Jews. Today, Soros is an atheist who doesn't embrace his Jewish identity and rarely supports Jewish causes or Israel.
He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq.
There must be some kind of way out of here, said the Joker to the thief.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range
There's
of
too much confusion.
the situation in Syria.
I can't get no relief.
All of us have been saying
Businessmen, they drink my wine. I'm kept their view,
I said, is it classified?
while all the women
Yes, sir.
came away.
I said, well, don't show it
Barefoot
to me.
servants too,
And I saw him.
outside in the cold distance.
Sorry, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show
Wild cat did growl.
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
Two riders were a hook.
it to you. I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iraq.
That, of course, is something, again, very, very much a part of my psyche, anti-Semitism and you know, hatred of Jews. I think there are enough Jews.
I belong to the human race. What makes a person human and not an animal? Compassion, love, understanding, acceptance, learning, creativity. What makes a person an animal? Hatred, ignorance, lack of love, lust, irresponsibility. This is why I belong to the human race. I don't see color. Color is non-existent in a human race. Either you are part of the human race or you're an animal. You can either be a racist, inbred, dumbass, ignorant fuck, or you can be an enlightened human being. The thing that makes us all different is melanoma. That's it. Melanoma. We all bleed the same. I like William Shakespeare, you know. We all bleed the same. We all have the same type blood types. And we have interchangeable parts. Just ignorance. I get so tired of hearing about white pride, black pride, Muslims, you know, atheists, and everything else. Everyone's trying to separate and become identified as something else. Black lives will matter. 4 people were shot by a cop, but just in the last week, over 80 freaking black people killed white people. This has been going on for years. Is it the black people's fault? No. Nobody's responsible for their own actions. I blame ignorance, you know, because, you know, what is racism? Ignorance. Racism is ignorance, and ignorance has no color or sexual preference, you know. It's very easy to accept this and get past this, but most people would call any intelligent person who does any critical thinking a sellout or racist. What kind of ignorance is that? In a world that we're supposed to respect each other's views and ideas, come to the table and have a discussion. I want to ask a question here. You know, in these debates, they have a handler. And usually the handler is with their handling. Okay, that's why they're called a handler. Now, during these debates that they've been putting on on TV and radio and everything else for the last 100 years, let's say, and TV 60 years plus, they really have never had this kind of mix-up. I want you to notice that they waited for the applause to end for everyone else, but when they said Ben Carson, they said it softly and while the crowd was cheering and yelling. Now, one ever looked over their shoulder to see if the person entered or exited. Nobody said anything. Is this their media's way of saying to a brain surgeon, a highly intelligent human being that they've been mocking all this time, that he's a dumb nigger? I don't know. It seems odd they wait the applause for everyone else to die down, but for him they didn't. What's your opinion? Being childish or ignorant in this case?
Texas Senator Ted Cruz.
Businessman Donald Trump.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush.
And Ohio Governor John Kasich.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican candidates.
And Dr. Ben Carson, please come out on the stage. He's standing there as well. Dr. Carson.
And Donald Trump.
And lastly, we welcome back to the debate stage Donald Trump.
But Kasich, can I introduce
It's so noisy
Kasich?
in here. Yes, yes. We're going to introduce Ohio Governor John Kasich.
It's all over money. Media wants to hype up the entertainment for certain people. See the white people bite the black people so we can see who wins. Serious. If you ever known about Black Wall Street, it's a town. It used to be an all black town and very thriving, very industrious. Tuscania, and but something happened. A newspaper reported that I don't have the information in front of me, so excuse me, but I believe it was 6 black males raped a white woman and still at large, hiding in Tuscania. Police have no leads. What happens? White thugs got their guns and went looking for these six black men. Black men in the town didn't know nothing about this. All they see is a bunch of white guys with guns looking for 6 black rapists. Well, one blacks got their guns. Pretty soon, we had a big old war. In science, this is what they call a beta test. You know, they test out the waters first and see how this works. So they pitted people against each other, and then the National Guard came in, declared martial law over this area, and then they destroyed the black community. It never recovered, all because of a lie. It's so easy for people to believe a lie and not do any critical thinking or any investigative work. It was the white people's fault. They told it was. If they didn't believe that newspaper lie and what the newspaper told them, none of that would have happened. If they didn't grab their guns and become vigilantes and to help bring these 6 people to justice, none of that would have happened. It's now reversed. These cops doing their job. The media's hyping this up. Black Lives Matter. Well, it wasn't started by blacks. The whole movement was started by white people. I find it odd that we go through life and think, you know, who cares? Who wants? It's all a shell game. They're pitting people against other people. It's all for money, too. It's all for control. Control. That's what money is control. It makes you into a volunteer slave. Each link, it's a bit more of you. Money and currency is supposed to represent your sweat, blood, and tears. But you don't own that. You rent it. Now, you gotta ask why. Why does one person's life mean more than anyone else's life? We got the knockout game going around, you know. We got other things going on. This is unacceptable. If it was white people doing this to black people, it would be up in arms. It'd be racist. And it should be. And it should be racist against black people. But I don't see color. I see humans. We're acting like fucking savages when we do these things. You don't belong to the human race. If you believe in hurting another human being and that one person because of their melanoma is more valuable than another person, then you're an animal. I don't care if you're fucking white, black, red, green, purple, whatever color you are. You don't belong to the human race. If you think your skin color defines who you are and gives you special privilege over another human being, then you're no better than the KKK, any other people out there. You're no better than anyone else because of your skin color. There's people all over the world suffering worse than anyone else can ever imagine, but you're focused on your problems. What is your problems? What is the problems we have? It's all about currency. It's all about money. Do away with it. It's pretty easy to live in a community without using money. All you have to do is combine 10 people together and get these 10 people to bake bread, become self-sufficient, and this expands farther and farther and farther. We can all live without using currency. We don't even need it. In this modern technology era of ours, McDonald's got robots that are flipping burgers now. And I really appreciate this because there's no more spittle on my food and no more floor burgers. You know, nothing wrong with floor burger, but you know, who knows? The thing is, we got technology that can build a house in a day. We got technology can do all kinds of things. It's sitting around. Why? Teachers become teachers because they want to teach people, not for the money. Cops become cops because they want to preserve and protect, mostly. Doctors become doctors because they want to heal. They want to make people feel better. They want to save lives. It's a noble thing. These are noble things. Look at Congress. You look at any demographic area that has the highest amount of poverty, it's Democrats. And if you look at Republican areas, it's, you know, we can flip this back and forth all the time. And they're both in cahoots with each other, but I get frustrated with ignorance in this world. So I came up with 5 ideas. 5 ideas that does away with all the crime, the injustices, and everything else. The top of the one you probably guessed already is to do away with currency. Second, mutual respect. If you don't respect another human being for being a human being, then you should be shot. So you don't pass your ignorance onto the next generation of yours. Third, equality between parents. Both parents should have say in the other parent's lifestyle. They should share the child's responsibilities in raising the child together. So the woman can't have no man. The man can't have no woman until the children are 18 and out of the house. It's free, you know. Then you can get married and be whatever you want to be. Is that fair? I don't know. I think it's more you're screwing your kids up more. I remember a revolving door on my mom's freaking area. She used to beat the shit out of me. My stepdad molested me. Do I blame all atheists for that? Do I think that all atheists are molesters? No, but my stepdad was. I judge people on their actions. A person should be judged by their actions, and all molesters should be shot. If a woman falsely accuses another man, or a man falsely accuses a woman, they should be shot, because you are playing with another person's life. Fifth, the only people who can run a government and vote for a government or do any kind of voting are people who laid their lives down for this government. So I say military. The military are only personnel are only ones who are allowed to vote. Seems reasonable, don't it? If you're willing to risk your own life, you should get all the benefits. You should get free medical care. You should be getting a free house. You should be getting everything free. If you're willing to lay your life down for the Constitution of your country, then I think you should get everything for free. You should be held on a higher standard than any other citizen, honest. But if we did away with currency, we'd do away with most of the wars. 95% of all the problems in the United States and in the world. You laugh. You can laugh. Oh, how would anything get done? Oh. Well, that's because you don't have a higher IQ than that of Lint, if you can't figure that out. It is funny, though, how people think of themselves as morally superior to others. Are you morally superior than anyone else? I don't think so. Nobody is more morally superior than another person. It's your actions that make you superior than another person. Are you willing to lay your life down? And see, this is the problem with Congress I have. They're willing to sacrifice other people's lives because they don't have to shuffle up their own life. But if they had every time Congress or the Senate or the president voted for war and wanted to go to war, and they had to put their own children and their own life on the front line. I mean, on the front line, no backstage areas or anything else. They had to be on the front line, holding their fucking M16 and marching down a fucking suicide alley to go for that war they voted for. Then that was a war worth fighting. Because if you're willing to sacrifice your firstborn or your life and your child, then it's a war that's worth fighting. If you're not willing to sacrifice your life and your child's life, then it's not a worthwhile war. Equality. It was about freedom. If you're not willing to fight and die for freedom, then what are you doing? I see animals fighting, going around, killing each other.
Daily File exclusive, Captain Daniel Quinn. He's a former Army captain and teammate of Sergeant Martland, and Republican Congressman Duncan Hunter, who has been fighting to keep Martland in the Army. Thank you both for being back with me. Let me start with you, Captain Quinn. This is unbelievable. I mean, so he's done. The Army has sided essentially with the Afghan child rapist.
It's correct. It's it's a travesty, not just to Charles, but to his wife, to his 2 kids. Charles was born to be a soldier. He did it better than anyone I've ever worked with. And it's terrible, not just for him and his family, but for our country as well.
What do you, go ahead.
All he wants to do is continue to serve our country with distinction, just like he's done for the last 11 years. And the Army is refusing to let him do that. It's a disservice to him, his family, and to everyone that's worked with him, for him, and that knows him.
What do you make of this statement we just heard? There's no policy in place to ignore human rights violations, none at all.
I mean, that's not necessarily true, because we had, as we've discussed, there's been 3 previous cases of sexual assault. Charles and I reported each one up our chain of command, and what their policy is that we have to go through the local government of Afghanistan. So in our case, we went through the local government 3 times, and all 3 times it was basically met with indifference.
They don't care.
Exactly. So I mean,
they don't care. These
yeah.
Afghan commanders are raping children, and this is somehow acceptable over there, and they expect the American commanders to say, all right, no problem.
Yes, and then we're just told continually you have to go through the local government, and the last time we did that, a 14-year-old girl was raped in a field, and her rapist was found guilty, sentenced to 1 day in jail, and then when he was released from jail, she was forced to marry him because she was no longer a virgin. It was now tainted and was unacceptable to be married to anybody else.
I don't get it, Congressman Hunter. I don't get it. I don't get why. All right, the Afghans are going to do what they're going to do. We're not going to change Afghan culture, I suppose. However, we are who we are. And these guys sounded like they're asking them to sacrifice all they stand for in order to serve their country over there.
Yeah, imagine this too. You're a 20-year-old kid. You went over and you're serving your nation, and on your U.S. base, you actually see child rapists and pedophiles, and hear the screams of little boys at night, and you're told it's an Afghan criminal issue. The DOD's statement today is pure lawyer speak. You're a lawyer. Of course, there's no policy like they said, but they were allowing this to happen because I don't know if they don't want to offend the wrong people. There is a shameful lack of leadership and morality in the Army, and you know, frankly, I can't get anywhere on this issue,
really?
Even in the Armed Services
really?
Committee.
I mean, who can reverse it? Who can reverse it? Who can get Martland back in?
The Secretary of the Army or the Secretary of Defense. The problem is the Secretary of the Army is a former congressman who's buddies with half of my colleagues on Capitol Hill.
Why wouldn't they want this? Why are they against him?
Anyway.
Why?
So I mean, well, because they're all chummy. They're all buddies. We've been bringing this up, Megan. This has been 3 or 4 months now. This Martland case has exposed that there have been hundreds of soldiers and Marines now exposed to these child rapists on their bases. This isn't like out with Martland and Danny Quinn alone and unafraid in these small provinces. This was happening on U.S. bases where you had hundreds, if not thousands, of U.S. military personnel. So this has now been allowed by the U.S. government, and instead of stopping this, and the Army saying, hang on, we're going to do a common sense test, let Sergeant First Class Martland stay in, we're going to stop this. They aren't doing that.
No, they're saying they've chosen a different side,
speak, and we're going to kick them out anyway. We don't care
Captain
what the right
Quinn,
thing to do is.
I gotta
do you
go.
want your son or daughter serving in the Army?
I got to go.
Do you want your son or daughter to serve an institution who says pedophilia and child rape is okay as long as it's the custom of the land and it's a criminal case for them? Don't worry about it. That's nonsense. We go overseas
I gotta go.
to fight for our principles.
I don't think I got to ask you, Captain Quinn, before we go.
Sure.
How is your friend? Is he Captain Martland?
I mean, you know, first of all, he's very thankful for all the support he's received from the whole country. It's humbling for both him and I. We really appreciate it, and you know, he's doing all right. He's obviously definitely broken today from the news, but he's going to keep fighting. We're going to keep fighting, and Congressman Hunter's going to keep fighting. And we just ask America to keep helping Congressman Hunter out. Write to him, write your congressman, and let's get Charles to stay in the Army.
Thank you, guys.
Joe Biggs here with Infowars.com. Now, last week an article came out in the Daily Mail titled "Decorated Green Beret is Kicked Out of U.S. Army Special Forces After Shoving Afghan Police Commander Who Raped Boy Who Was 12 Years Old and Then Beat Up His Mother When She Reported the Crime to Higher-Ups." And now you have a decorated soldier who was with the U.S. Army Special Forces for 11 years. He is now being kicked out after he stood up for a young rape victim and his mother who were beaten by this rogue police commander. Now, word got out to Sergeant First Class Martland that one of the police commanders that he had trained had sexually assaulted a boy and hit his mother. And he decided to take action. There was a squabble between him and the commander, and he shoved this guy to the ground. Now, this Afghan police commander left with only bruises, nothing really serious, and the Army saw fit to essentially remove him from his position in Afghanistan, put him at a desk job for a while, and then send him back home, where now they have involuntarily discharged him from the Army. Now, there's a lot of people in the operator community, special forces, higher ups, and politicians who think this is a disgrace and want to hail this Sergeant First Class Martland as a hero, which he should be, because there is a rape culture going on in Afghanistan. I myself have witnessed that type of things when I was deployed in Afghanistan. We used to call it Man Love Thursday, where you would see and hear just some of the most god-awful things that will never leave your mind. Now, you didn't see the actual stuff, but you could see a grown man holding a younger boy's hand, and you know that they weren't father and son, that there was something going on. Now, the Washington Examiner reported on the invading troops' struggle with the constant displays of affection towards young boys, as well as glaring evidence of underage homosexual activity. I know Marines and soldiers who have refused to work with Afghan military or police, said one U.S. military official who spoke to the Examiner anonymously. It's not about homosexuality as much as it is about the young boys. Some of them like to show pictures on their cell phone. That should be illegal. Some of the Afghans have their own young boys they use for sexual purpose, and we can't do anything about it. Now, the situation is particularly troublesome because the people committing the abuse are the people working with coalition forces. In other words, these are the people the coalition funds. We in the West are working with people who rape children in order to throw out the people who prevented this practice. Now, during the Taliban rule of the region from 1996 until late 2001, under Mullah Omar, bachabazi was driven from the social norm and outlawed as a transgression against humanity and Allah. A zero-tolerance ban on sodomy and all forms of homosexuality, bachabazi chief among these, was enforced throughout the region with martial capital and lethal strength. The Taliban's parameters drew from a pre-Islamic Pashtun code as well as a rigid strain of Wahhabi doctrines. This new governance brought with it an emphasis on eliminating immoral vices. Now, any traces of these sexual tendencies or relations between males was met with a swift death sentence. Yet following the overthrow of the Taliban, the practice immediately began again. That leads to the rather sad irony that the very war being fought to liberate Afghans from abuse under the Taliban fueled the abuse of Afghan boys. But like I said, that's something that I've personally seen and been aware of, and it's disgusting. And the weird thing is, the problem is, I don't know anything about this Sergeant First Class Charles Martland whatsoever. He could be a good guy. He could be a bad guy. Maybe he has a series of, in the past where he snapped or not, or he could be the greatest guy in the world. Really, this man, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry that he's being kicked out, but there's a bigger story here than just this operator who is being kicked out for stopping this rape. Now, there's a huge rape culture in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has the most pedophilia per capita in all of Asia. It's out of control. And a lot of this is caused by misinterpretation of the Quran and the way a lot of the Muslims believe that women should be completely clothed. You can only see their eyes. And you'll hear that in a lot of the stories later on where these Afghan soldiers, these men and tribes say, how can I fall in love with a woman if I can't even see her face? I can see all these boys' faces and find out which ones are good looking. And then they turn them into these, what is the term? Bachabazi bachabazis. And you'll hear the times that I was in Afghanistan, you would hear some of the soldiers look at some of our guys, and the younger ones who are probably like 18 or 19 with blonde hair, they would call them cheskas, which means basically like pretty boy. And it's kind of a scary situation when you're in the middle of Afghanistan and there's not that many people around you and you're highly outnumbered by the Afghan population, and these guys are looking at you calling you Cheska. Just know that there was a few of my guys that didn't sleep too good at night knowing that they were being eyeballed, but we'll get into that. Now, Western forces fighting in southern Afghanistan had a problem. Too often, soldiers on patrol passed on an older man walking hand in hand with a young boy. Their behavior suggested he was not the boy's father, like I said earlier, times I've seen. Then British soldiers found that young Afghan men were actually trying to touch and fondle them. Military investigator Anne Maria Cardinali told me that soldiers didn't understand. All of this was disconcerting that the Defense Department hired Cardinali, a social scientist, to examine this mystery. Her report, Pashtun Sexuality, startled not even one Afghan but Western forces were shocked and repulsed. Now, here we are, we're acting like Team America World Police, we're trying to go in and save the day, and yet we know that there's this problem going on, and we're not doing anything about it. We're going to kick a hero out, a Green Beret out, for trying to stop this pedophilia nature that's happening in Afghanistan, and we're going to let this guy who raped this boy go unpunished. And this is what's been sanctioned by the U.S. State Department. Now, this incident happened with Sergeant Martland back in 2011. Now, guess who was in charge of the State Department in 2011? None other than presidential hopeful Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, she is the reason that this soldier is essentially being punished. Now we have the documents that Judicial Watch first reported on back in 2011. But it says here in March of 2014, the U.S. State Department acknowledged the centuries-old practice had become a problem, yet that followed the Obama administration issuing a new Army manual telling troops not to judge Afghan social customs, such as the practice of bacha bazi. And let's go back to the Judicial Watch report of December 11, 2012. New Army manual orders soldiers not to criticize Taliban. Now, this is a strong indicator that the Obama administration's crusade to appease Islam has gone too far. The draft leaked to the newspaper offers a list of taboo conversation topics that soldiers should avoid, including making derogatory comments about the Taliban, advocating women's rights, any criticism of pedophilia, directing any criticism towards Afghans, mentioning homosexuality and homosexual conduct, or anything related to Islam. And on top of that, we're going to go into Afghanistan and we're going to protect opium fields, and we're going to allow the opium growth to continue to explode. You have places like Vermont where heroin addiction's out of control, and that's all because what we're doing. The government wants you to think that we're going into these wars for good reasons. Everything that we've done in the past has led to drugs. I mean, with Dark Alliance, Gary Webb, Rick Ross.
I'm the real Rick Ross.
Today, there's a new epidemic, smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
The CIA used him as a pawn to sell drugs to help fund the secret war in Nicaragua.
These guys coming out and talking about how the CIA is the one that sparked the crack epidemic, that the CIA was flying these drugs in. This is something that is going on, and it's a serious matter that needs to be looked at and dealt with. You should not be punished for standing up and doing the right thing, and the fact that our country is going to discharge this soldier, this hero, and turn their back on him when he did the right thing, that shows you what's going on right now. You need to wake up, open your eyes, and see that our country is doing evil, dirty things. It's not all glamour. It's not all glitz. It's not as patriotic as you might make it out to be sometimes. Now, yes, I am a patriot. I'm a former U.S. soldier in the Army, Staff Sergeant, Roger. But at the same time, there's a lot of bad stuff going on, and I'm not going to sit back and keep my mouth shut and my eyes closed. I'm going to sit here and talk about it because it's the right thing to do, and we have to bring attention to this. I'm Joe Biggs with Infowars.com.
They're called dancing boys, T-boys, or, by many who have had to turn a blind eye to them, Afghan sex slaves. A subculture of bacha-bazi, or boy play, is widely known in Afghanistan, but for U.S. service members there, the abuse of these children is infuriatingly hard to stop, especially when the abuse comes from American-backed Afghan commanders there.
I had a boy because every commander had one.
In a 2010 PBS documentary, a former Afghan commander of the Northern Alliance spoke openly, shamelessly, about this sick practice.
If I didn't have a boy, I couldn't compete with the others.
Today, the New York Times reports that the American military stands accused of ordering troops to purposely turn a blind eye to the abuse in order to maintain good relations with Afghan forces.
The reason that we weren't able to step in with these local rape cases was We didn't want to undermine the authority of the local government. We were trying to build up the local government. Us acting after the local government fails to can certainly undermine their credibility.
Retired U.S. Army Captain Dan Quinn tells CNN that he and Sergeant First Class Charles Martland were punished for confronting an admitted Afghan child rapist, a police commander.
The confrontation turned physical, and I picked him up, threw him onto the ground multiple times, and Charles did the same thing. We basically had to make sure that he fully understood that if he ever went near that boy or his mother again, there was going to be hell to pay.
And he tells CNN that he and Martland were relieved of their duties shortly after that confrontation. Martland is being involuntarily discharged by the Army next month.
I think the fear is that if we were to intervene, we wouldn't have the kind of close working relationship that we need with Afghan military.
Terrorism expert Jessica Stern says this is far from an isolated incident. She's spoken to several service members who say they were disturbed by what they saw.
They must have felt that they couldn't respond in the way they would have liked to. It was clearly a very painful subject.
Congressman and veteran Duncan Hunter, a Republican from California, is trying to save Martland's career, writing to Defense Secretary Ash Carter, quote, "Martland stood up to a child rapist. I trust you will give this case the attention it demands." A Pentagon spokesman told CNN today, "We have never had a policy in place that directs any military member or any government personnel overseas to ignore human rights abuses. Any sexual abuse is completely unacceptable and reprehensible."
They're killing everyone else. These are animals, and I'm heartbroken about it. I look over Middle East, and I see family members over there, and other people I know. Well, for what? Because they're animals. People are animals over there. American soldiers who stand up over in Afghanistan against Afghan colonels and everything else because they have this thing, they have little boys in their barracks that they fuck in the ass. And American soldier stands up and says, "Hey, no, this is freaking wrong." Court-martialed and dismissed. And say, "No, that's wrong. You know, he's a little boy. You don't do that." But they get court-martialed. And Obama's command is to accept this. Respect their culture. Respect their culture. Why are we over there? Why are we over there if we're not trying to help people, trying to save little boys from being molested? The colonel said, one of the Afghans colonels said, "It's our right to fuck little boys in their asses if we want to." I don't understand it. I really don't understand what's wrong with this world. Why can't people see things the way I see it? Greed, blinders. They got these blinders on of hatred and greed, and it's the 7 sins. People are too lazy to do anything about it. They're too fat. They're too stupid. Sloth, pride, greed. It's 7 sins. And the USA is soaked in it. I hate to bring my religion into this, but as an Aramaic Christian, it's a sad day. I love America. I was born here. I love everything about it. I love the Constitution. I love the idea that all people are created equal. I love that, If you lived in Kuwait, 1965, you were still a slave, and the Kuwaiti family were giving their kids fucking slaves. Their kids on their birthday, giving them slaves. I don't understand you people.
We are sorry to have to drag the United Nations into it again, but there is something we must add. We have the evidence of this British officer, Lieutenant Marlon Steele of the 37th Military Police District of Maridi. On the morning of May the 6th, 1963, 5 Kivu slave traders were arrested. They are guilty of having used these instruments of torture on 15 Bakudo children so as to reduce them to such a pitiful physical condition as to arouse the generosity of the passers-by. We are sorry and ashamed to have to insist on showing this terrible document. This young British officer who is collecting evidence is sorry and ashamed too, but it is his duty. Just as it is our duty and that of the whole civilized world, or the world that calls itself civilized and feels smugly at peace with its conscience and with God, to consider this an accusation, to stop this cruelty.
Hungary is taking issue with billionaire George Soros. The hedge fund manager is being criticized by his home country for supporting illegal immigration. The right-wing government is feeling the pressure amid the refugee crisis, slamming Soros for promoting liberal migrant policies. The billionaire himself has previously criticized the Hungarian government for the way it's dealing with the crisis. Soros continues to back a variety of organizations through his pro-democracy charities. The bottom line, the Hungarian government and George Soros are butting heads.
Hungarian billionaire investor George Soros has responded to fierce criticism from Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán about his views on the European refugee crisis. Orbán said last week that people like Soros are responsible for the refugee crisis and threaten the traditional European way of life. But in a speech at a conference for his foundation in Budapest, Soros praised keynote speaker Bernard Kouchner, who was the UN official in charge of the occupation of Kosovo back in 2000. Kouchner implied Orbán's policies were racist and xenophobic.
He did interfere. I visited him, and he was definitely somebody who interfered.
Kouchner criticized some European member states for not taking enough initiative during the refugee crisis.
500 or 550 millions of European people, the richest of the world, and we are unable to share with 1 or 2 million in addition. This is untrue. There is no political will but a political attitude, with nationalism coming back, with racism coming back.
Orbán says the arrival of thousands of refugees and other migrants in Europe this year from Asia, Africa and the Middle East amounts to an attack on the continent's Christian identity and is a terrorism threat.
George Soros, what does the refugee crisis in both the Mediterranean and around Calais say about the great European project?
Unfortunately, it tells us that it's failing. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book, The Tragedy of the European Union. It was a prediction then. It has become a reality. And the plight of the asylum seekers is a chapter in that tragedy.
Now, you have written about the contrast between Europe accepting millions of refugees from Eastern Europe after the Second World War, after communism, and now far fewer, but they are not of European stock and they are being rejected. What do you do about it?
Yes. Well, you need a unified European migration policy. You now have 28 different countries with different policies, and some are directly contradictory to each other. And that is, it has created a chaos, and that is what's turning public opinion against the migrants who are themselves the victims, who deserve help. And instead of that, they are turned into illegal position, and they are desperate, as the situation in Calais demonstrates.
Do you think the ethnicity, the race of the people who are trying to get into Europe is part of the issue?
Yes, definitely. I was myself an asylum seeker, and I was treated very well. I went to England. I asked for asylum. I got it. I became an Anglophile, and unfortunately, the European Union is now facing the opposition of the members, of which Britain is very much at fault, because Britain has opted out of any participation in the solution of this issue. But you can't isolate yourself. The easy answer is withdraw, protect yourself. But as the situation in Calais demonstrates, you can't do that.
But I can hear,
we are all...
I can hear people saying, hang on a minute, our population has increased by 2, 3, 4 million since the Eastern Bloc became free. How many more people can a small island take? That is the question on many people's lips.
Yes, but you also have a declining birth rate, and you need, for a flourishing economy, you need some growth. And it has to be replaced by migrants from outside. So there is a need for migrants, and there is a need for growth as well. But that's where the problem is.
Well, what you're looking at here is what they are calling the rough guide. Now, this is big time, because what this shows is concrete evidence that George Soros, the billionaire that we've caught backing so many different things, like cutting checks to fake protesters in the streets and supporting the uprising of coups in other countries and chaos in countries like Ukraine and abroad, while George Soros, his group, several groups here, admitted and have openly stated that they are handing out these rough guide handbooks that are packed with maps, tips, phone numbers of organizations, food stamp places, government assistant places that all these immigrants can get into once they get inside these countries. This is all being brought to you by George Soros. Now, it's under the guise that they want to help all these people in the best way possible. But if you truly have done your homework and your research, and you truly know who George Soros and company are, then you know, with their hands all over this, then there is way more to it than what it seems. We now have proof that George Soros and a couple different organizations underneath of him here are responsible for putting this out. Now, they name those groups right here. W2EU, which means Welcome to Europe. This is the name of the organization, and they are directly funded by Soros, given a whole slew of these manuals to hand out to all these immigrants, so these immigrants know everything that they need to know before taking off. So instead of a billionaire, guys, funding a way to help all these people, like put them in some houses or spend a little bit of money to save their lives, maybe some solid boats to get across the water, none of that. None of it. Instead, they spend a few pennies printing up these booklets with information on what to do in them, and have, by their own admission, they're activists. That's right, they're activists on the ground giving these out. That's how far and deep-rooted this billionaire is taking all this all across the globe. It's time people wake up and see it before this problem comes to your neighborhood. And you're wondering who's behind it all. I've been trying to tell you for the longest time. It's the same old goons, all on Jesuit command. I'll leave a link. It's been Dabu7, eyes open. And this is Illuminati.
Talking to every one of you animals out there. If you accept what I'm saying, then you're human. Welcome to the human race, my human brothers and sisters of the world. If you can hear my voice, then you're human. We need to demolish these fucking assholes that are controlling our lives. They're not making our lives better. No one's going to make your life better except you. You got to rise up. Start fucking resisting. I know what you're going to say. You first. All right. I'll put my money where my mouth is. I just hate it. It breaks my heart. Every time I see a child hurt, a child hunger, the whole entire world would fit. The whole entire world population will fit in Texas. Did you know that? The whole entire population, all 7 billion people plus, would fit in Texas with enough room left over to feed every freaking human being. That's a fact. If you like it or not, that's a fact. The waste that we would produce would be enough to power the whole entire city. That's a fact. Eco-friendly system that you wouldn't even believe, and not touch technology one bit. We would actually expand in technology, believe it or not. If we did away with currency, people would still learn. We would have a college that would free, and teachers who were actually enjoying to teach. We'd remove corruption out of the system, because corruption is only generated by money and power. And what is power? People would not give someone their loyalty so easily either. And if that person violated our leaders, violated our freedom, or us, guess what? We could remove them so easily. But people are scared to lose shit. They don't care if they send you to war. They don't care if you live or die. You're a number to them. They have no sympathy for our brothers and sisters in arms. They don't. But if you talk about resisting or not paying your taxes, they'll send you to prison. They'll fine you and send you to prison and take everything you own. But they'll let you go to war and die. For what? Money. Control. This is everything. Everywhere you go, all around the world. It's not a socialist program. It's not what I'm talking about. It's not socialist. It's not. There's no really word for it. It's humanist. It's the most human program I can come up with. And so what ideology would we all have? I don't know. Let's each create a city, and the ideology that wins. Southern Baptists can have their own city. Mormons can have their city. You know, atheists can have their city. Aramaic Christians like myself can have our city. I can't guarantee Aramaic Christians would be out in space and doing more things with their lives than all the others, because our belief system is to feed the mind with knowledge, to keep our bodies pure, because our bodies is the temple of God. It holds the most precious item that God gave us. It's our soul, the energy, our life force. So we'd eat the organic, healthiest, freshest foods there is. We'd fill our minds with knowledge. We'd expand ourselves. But that's just my opinion, and it's a little biased. So, but it's a nice thought. We were supposed to be physical fit, always improving ourselves. That's the key. That's the ground floor of everything, of all beliefs. But I guess I'm done. My rant's over. I just want y'all to know I love you. Even you damn animals, I love you. And I hope that someday you animals become human.